All right, Greg, it's 6:30 if you want to get going.
Sounds good. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Community Development Director Smith, would you please take roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Wigand?
Here.
Commissioner Goodell?
Here.
Chair Riggs?
Present.
And City Council Member Henry. Oh, I've muted Glenn. He's here.
All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in to tonight's meeting. We value our residents and community members, and we want to make sure that anyone who wants to participate and provide input can do so. This meeting is available live via the city's website by clicking on the video link under upcoming meetings on the homepage at cityofcarver.com. Or you can join remotely via Zoom conferencing services and provide input. Information related to joining the Zoom conferencing services can be found on the city's website or attached to the agenda for this meeting. We ask that anyone wishing to address the commission wait to be recognized by the chair, be respectful, wait for your turn to speak, and don't speak over one another. Callers will still need to provide their names and addresses for the record. First item is to approve the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Can I have a second to the motion?
Commissioner Goodell seconded.
Any further discussion? Motion by Commissioner Weigard to approve the agenda. Second by Commissioner Goodell. Community Development Director Smith, could you please do a roll call vote?
Sure. Commissioner Wigand? You're on mute, but I saw you
Aye.
there. Commissioner Goodell?
Aye.
Chair Riggs?
Chair Riggs, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. As appropriate, motion carries. Next item to review is approve the minutes from May 21st, 2020 minutes of the Planning Commission meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the May 21st, 2020 Planning Commission minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Chair Riggs seconds it. Any further discussion? Motion by Commissioner Weigard to approve the May 21st, 2020 Planning Commission minutes. Second by Commissioner Riggs. Community Development Director Smith, could you please do a roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Wigand?
Aye.
Commissioner Goodell?
Aye.
Chair Riggs?
Chair Riggs, aye. Thank you. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is new business. Appoint chair and vice chair for the commission. Community Development Director Smith.
Thank you. So this generally happens in March, but things have been a little bit strange since about then with maternity leave, COVID, and then not a ton going on development-wise in Carver. So we're coming at it a little bit late, but something we do need to do each year. So tonight we'll be asking for the selection of the chair and vice chair. So what the chair does is they essentially run the meeting like Commissioner Riggs is doing right now. They open the meeting, run public hearings, call for actions. It's super easy. I help you. Brenda puts together the lovely action agenda, so she makes it a really easy process. The big thing that the vice chair does is if the chair is absent, they fill in. So that's the role of the vice chair. Should the chair be absent, they just step up for the meeting. So I'll let you have a discussion. To nominate someone to be the chair, you would say, I nominate Commissioner Blank to be the chair of the Planning Commission for 2020.
Only discussion I would provide from Chair Riggs is if no one else is wanting to become the chair, I can still fulfill those duties. If someone else would like to be the chair, then that's perfectly fine as well. So.
Sounds good to me.
So is that
Thanks for volunteering, Riggs. I will make a motion to approve Chair Riggs as the chair. Again.
I will second.
Any further discussion? Motion by Commissioner Goodell to appoint Commissioner Chair Riggs as the Planning Commissioner Chair for 2021. Second by Commissioner Weigard. Community Development Director, could you please do a roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Weigand,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodell,
Aye.
Commissioner Riggs.
Commissioner Riggs, aye. Thank you. Motion carries. For any nominations for Vice Chair?
Probably feels tricky that the whole group isn't here, so you can nominate someone who's not here if you would like.
Who else is on the committee now?
Cindy Monroe, Jen Lane, Reed Welch, and then Krista is an alternate, and then Stephanie Griesinger is an additional alternate. So it's Jim, Cindy, Jen, or Reed.
I will nominate Cindy. That'll teach her to come.
Commissioner Riggs seconds that.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Motion by Commissioner Weigard to appoint Commissioner Cindy Monroe as the Planning Commissioner Vice Chair for 2021. Second by Commissioner Riggs. Community Development Director Smith, could you please do a roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner Weigand,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodell,
Aye.
Commissioner Riggs.
Commissioner Riggs, aye.
Very good.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item, zoning code update kickoff. Community Development Director Smith, would you please present the information on the zoning code updates?
Sure. And then I just want to have one more point on the role of the alternates for the Planning Commission. I know that gets a little bit confusing. So for the Planning Commission, we run with 7 members. There are 5 voting members at each meeting. So if one of the 5 voting members is not able to make it, the 2 alternates step in. So the alternates right now are Stephanie and Krista. So right now Krista is acting as a voting member since we don't have the full 5 seats. So just some clarification. So you are absolutely invited to be part of the conversation, ask questions, give feedback, but when it comes down to voting, we can only have 5 voting members per meeting. So just a reminder. I think Stephanie is going to hop on sometime during this meeting, so this will be my first Zoom meeting, but I can walk through that with her too, just since she is one of the alternates. So thank you for that, and I'm going to dive in to the zoning code update. I've been told by a certain city manager here that this presentation is probably going to be pretty boring, so I'm going to try to make it as fun as I can. If you have questions, feel free to stop me and let me know. It's a pretty big topic. It's stuff that I use every single day, so it's pretty second nature to me, but probably not many other people in this city. So if I don't catch you, raise your hand and we can open it up for questions and discussion. So the game plan tonight for the zoning code update, I'm going to give a brief history of zoning, talk about how we use it, when we use it. I'm going to talk about the goals of our zoning code update and then some process information as well. So Zoning 101 started in 2 major cities in the United States. So LA and New York City were the 2 first that kind of dove into zoning historically. So in 1908, LA adopted the first zoning code, which separated industrial users from residential users. So they were the leaders to say, hey, those uses probably shouldn't be next to each other. It's making people unhealthy. So LA was the first community to adopt a zoning regulation. And then next in 1916 was New York City, and that was in relation to equitable building. So in many cases, they were building apartment buildings that were really close together. So it's like a shotgun style apartment or a dumbbell. And many of the units didn't have windows or sunlight wasn't coming into the units. So at that point, New York City said these are unsafe working or living conditions, that if you don't have windows, no access to fresh air or sunlight, we probably should fix that. So in 1916, New York City adopted their first zoning code. Then in 1924 comes the State Standard Zoning Enabling Act, which allows every community to have zoning. So thinking back to 1924, Carver probably didn't have a zoning ordinance, but that is the act that allows us to have one today. So what is zoning? How do we use it? What does it do? So zoning is the separation of incompatible uses through land use. So there are different categories that we have. Largely the ones we think of often are residential, commercial, and industrial. And we recognize that these users all need to be in a community together, but there needs to be some separation so the users don't impede on each other, make for unsafe conditions. Something else that zoning does is it regulates the type of user on a site. So we can say, I want a big box user. So we can say commercial here, but we can't say I choose Target over Walmart. We can just say I want something that would be similar to those businesses, but we don't choose the end user. We just say how the land could be used by type. Zoning also sets what we call bulk regulations, which are things like setbacks, building height, number of dwelling units, open space, and parking requirements. So since you all live in the city of Carver, your home meets the setback requirements that are set for your neighborhood to ensure safety by the fire department and then to ensure that it meets the zoning code. Something I'm going to stress and that we will need to think about through this process a lot is that every use must be allowed somewhere in a community. So we can probably think of a few users that we would love to say, no way, not in Carver, we don't want you here, but we do need to allow to have them somewhere. So maybe that's a user that needs to have some distance from a residentially zoned district or somewhere that's a little more tucked away in the community, maybe not frontage on Highway 212, but every user needs to be able to find a spot in our community. Something that I love the most about zoning is that it is fact-based. So it sets the rules and they're generally pretty black and white. So I get a couple phone calls a year where someone asks me to look at the zoning code a little bit different, like try to find the gray spots, find the loopholes, but the goal of the zoning code is to be fact-based, set the rules, and eliminate those loopholes. So we all interpret the information the same way, and we can act on that information together. So why are we doing this now, and why are we doing it at all? So Chapter 50 of our zoning ordinance, which is available on the city's website, is this group's guidebook. These are our rules. These are the rules that we take. A project comes in, we make sure that the project can check all of the boxes in zoning code, in our zoning code, so Chapter 50. If the project does not meet some of the information in the zoning code, we either deny the project or we need to think a little bit creatively about if it's important and how we move forward. So this past 2019, in 2019 we worked really hard on Design Carver, our city's comprehensive plan. It was adopted in June. And every time that the comprehensive plan gets adopted, you need to update your zoning ordinance because they often fall out of sync with each other. It's supernatural. It happens every 10 years. This is not to say that either one was bad before, but there's new information in our comprehensive plan that our zoning code does not currently reflect. So our goal right now is to take Chapter 50 of the zoning ordinance and bring it up to where our comprehensive plan is with some of our goals that we set in that plan. So when this is completed, Chapter 50, the zoning ordinance, and the comprehensive plan will work together. We won't hit snarls every meeting when we're trying to approve a project, and we can move forward with good development and being good stewards of our community. So 2 things to think about. You see these maps all the time. It's our zoning map and our future land use map. So our zoning map goes with Chapter 50 of the city code, and that is what we know today. It's what our community is. Where the future land use map is included in our comprehensive plan, and it shows what we think we'll have in the future. So this shows our orderly annexation area, and it's kind of the dream document. So we sat down as a group and we make our best informed decisions when we're thinking about the future land use map. Often it's not something that we're for sure about. Where zoning is completely fact-based, we know for a fact that right now in City Hall, we're sitting in a public institution building, that's the zoning. Where in the future land use map, if we move 6 miles out of town, we're making our best guess about what that land might look like between now and 2040. So these maps, they work together, so you'll see that the zoning map is included in the future land use map, but the future land use map has so much more information with some of our best guesses with a comprehensive plan. So diving into that a little bit more, I'm going to talk about the zoning map first. So what we know, it's what the land is being used for currently. Again, it determines the type of user. So thinking about Fleet Farm, it is zoned commercial. It's not zoned fleet farm. So it's a commercial user, not the specific. We take the zoning code and we apply it to current projects and properties. So if a developer comes in, we apply the zoning code for them if it's in the city. It's our rule book. So this is where we go if we're not sure if something meets a regulation. This is where we can pull it up and apply the rules to our project. Where the future land use map is what we think. So it's how we think the land will develop in the future. The same thing, it determines the type of user, so it says commercial, not fleet farm. This largely applies to future projects and properties that will come into the city, and it's a guidebook. So I often say, when people are questioning the work we did in the comprehensive plan, I refer to us having a crystal ball. The stuff that's pretty close to city limits, the crystal ball is pretty clear. The stuff that is further out, closer to that 2040 mark, I often say that my crystal ball is pretty murky. So we made our best guess, but it's definitely something that we can think about differently if we need to for a certain project that we want to support. So another way to think about it is zoning is what we know to be true. Future land use map is what we think. So keep those in your head as zoning code and future land use, how they work together, but also at times they are completely different documents and they don't relate fully. So we have quite a few goals for this project. The first is that there are some new districts that we created in Design Carver that do not exist in our zoning code. I'll go into that. We need to update some densities. We need to rethink some uses, cut jargon and general cleanup, and then respond to the market we have in Carver. I'm going to go through each of these with slides. So first, there are some new districts in our plan that do not exist in our zoning code. So again, not good or bad, just a reaction to how the market has changed and how planning in Carver has changed a little bit. So you'll see on our future land use map, there are some colors that we currently don't have on our zoning map. So it's that purple, that dark purple, and then that orange are the two I want you to focus on. So the dark purple is a mix of commercial and industrial user, which we currently don't have as a district in our zoning code, and then a mixed use district. So as a close-up, it's the area along Jonathan Carver Parkway or County Road 11 going north towards Victoria, and then some land that is further west, as well as Mueller's Pit. So as we were thinking through the comprehensive plan, we identified these mixed use spaces to be something different than what we have in the community right now. And then the dark purple is in response to, we want to be open to business. If someone has a project that we think could fit in Carver that can increase our tax base, Stephanie just joined. We want to be able to say, we have a spot for you. We have this district that is commercial or industrial. So a lot of places that is an industrial user, they also have their like commercial office space there too. So we are working to provide a zone where one user can come in, even if they do several things in one building, they have a spot that they can fit in our community. So what do these districts mean to us? So thinking through our zoning code or our rule book, chapter 50, each district has 3 different buckets. So the first is a permitted use. So if the land is guided commercial and someone comes in and says, I want to open an ice cream shop, check, it's a permitted use. That sounds great. If someone comes into a commercial use and they say, I want to have a large-scale business that has a lot of truck traffic, we might say, that sounds great, but we're going to require a conditional use permit. So what a conditional use permit does is it allows the Planning Commission and City Council to take a step back and have another process that it needs to run through to say, you can have truck traffic, but it can only be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So it's adding some additional nuance to a specific project to allow it to be in that certain spot. And then, like I mentioned, every user needs to be able to have a spot in the community, but we can have prohibited uses in districts. So if in our commercial district, we can say no heavy industrial. So no manufacturing or fabricating in our commercial district, but you're welcome in our industrial district if you can find some property. So something to think about as we think about these users is, if not here, where? Remembering that each use needs to be somewhere in the community. So that's the big one of the new districts created in the comp plan. So we're going to think through the commercial industrial mix as well as the mixed use. The really exciting thing that I hope that one of you will be excited about this too, is that we get to do some of the dreaming about what that looks like. So if you are in a community that you really love and you love the way it feels, I'm going to ask you to remember that and then describe it to us. So it might be a community that has retail on the bottom, apartments on top, everything is super walkable. Where can we get that type of neighborhood? And that comes into mixed use, where it's a mix of residential and then commercial users together. So that cracks open a new product that we don't have in Carver today that we could, should a project move forward with mixed use. So commercial industrial and then mixed use are going to be our two big new ones. We'll do some refining of our current districts, but those are the big ones that we'll probably focus on. So next is we need to update the densities in our zoning code that reflect our comp plan. So if you think about the densities that are allowed right now in low density residential, it's 2 to 4 units per acre under our current zoning code and our previous comp plan. We've upped that number for 3 to 5. So something that's interesting that I think about a lot, that you probably do a couple times a year, is that we need to hit an average density of over 3 units per acre to meet the Met Council's goals. So if you think about a neighborhood like the Bluffs, where the lots are larger, so there are less homes generally in the development, that density is lower. So how do we bring, they're maybe closer to that 2 units per acre because the lots are so large, largely because of conservation, but how can we bring that 2 units per acre up to meet the 3 that's required? And that's where something like the Carver Ridge project can come in and provide some balance. So you take a pretty low density project, needs to have a balance of a high density project to meet at 3. Something that we can think about differently now is that we don't allow projects that are under that 3, just because it's really hard to make up some of that density if we're just seeing single family over and over and over. So the densities are increased across the board. Something that was tricky in 2018 was our high density residential district when Carver Ridge was developing. Our previous density requirement only went up to 12 units per acre, and Carver Ridge hit at 18. So if you think about that project, take the number of units divided by the gross acreage, it hits at 18 units per acre for that site. But we had to go back in for our city code and say, hey, these numbers aren't matching up, and we had to do a full amendment, which is fine. But something that does is that it tells the Carver Ridge or the project coming in that, number one, we maybe weren't looking for your project, we'll welcome it, but we weren't thinking about it as proactively as maybe we should have been. And also it's just an additional step. So as a community, focus for the comp plan was having housing for all, and this is a big step of moving towards that. So allowing for denser uses that can be for like senior development, apartment development, or that villa market. So if you think about the villas, which is a trendy marketing term, I don't think we'll move forward with the name villa in our zoning code, but there are villas in Oak Tree right now and Meadows at Spring Creek. And if you drive through those neighborhoods, those have been the first ones built and the first ones with people living in them. Oak Tree the fourth edition of that project, they were slated to have large executive homes, but they knew the villa market was so hot that they asked us to flip. So they recognize that the villa market is so important right now and they can make so many sales that it's something that I think people are going to be chasing for a while. The villa market is largely the single level, HOA maintained, so you don't have grass and snow removal, and something that as people are able to stay in their homes longer, it becomes important. So often that's the 0-step entry, all single level. So the increased density, it can also allow for greater conservation. So another project that we worked on together was Meridian Fields, and a large portion of that project is a huge wetland. So we made the lots a little bit smaller to have conservation in that area, which drove the density up. Something else that can come from this, I say this so lightly, is that home costs could potentially be lower if the lots are smaller, if the builder is able to capitalize more on land, if they can give a smaller product. So we have been struggling in Carver. We have so much development and we are so excited to have large national builders, but I often hear quite a bit that we don't have a product for the new home buyer right now. I know that I think home sales in the 200s for new builds is kind of a thing of the past right now, but how can we meet a market at a lower home cost where we could get a new homeowner that could potentially move their way up in Carver? So there are plenty of developments now with larger homes at a higher price point, but it's often that first entry-level home that we're missing right now in our market. So how could greater density potentially lower home costs is that you can put more homes on a piece of land in a project, and it could allow for different product type in our market. So 10 years ago when the zoning code is being updated, I don't suspect that anyone in our chairs said, hey, there's going to be this new thing and it's going to be a villa and it's going to be single level and it's going to sell like a hotcake. So in 10 years, what is that product going to be? My crystal ball is very murky on that, but maybe we have a surge in duplexes. And how can we respond to that with higher densities? So allowing greater flexibility in the densities while maintaining the requirement to hit 3 units per acre by the Met Council. So that's the update density and housing type. And then something that I think is important today as we talk about this is what is here or what could be here today. So as we continue to move forward kind of in COVID and post-COVID, I think there are definitely going to be major technology changes for communities. What feels important in a community now maybe is different, like office space, I think is a lot less important right now. I think that's going to be a trend that continues in the future, but maybe we have an increase of co-working spaces. So maybe you work out of your home, but there's a space downtown Carver that you can get together with 10 people just to say hi and drink coffee with if you're an extrovert and you're feeling a little bit sad in COVID. Something else that I think we need to focus on is senior living. So Carver Ridge was a great step in that direction. So we have memory care and assisted living, but we're lacking like in an independent facility where a senior can move into an apartment complex but live independently. So completely their own unit, no outside help. But a product that we don't have right now is that independent senior beyond the villa market. But I think there is some benefit to having greater density projects. Like I talked about before, thinking about those walkable neighborhoods. So again, it's probably the mixed use that we'll be hitting, but what does it look like for us? Is it important that we have a higher mix of retail with our commercial, higher retail with our residential? What are we looking for in those communities? And then something that the city attorney has brought up to me that we need to think about probably pretty closely are vaping and tobacco shops. So this is a pretty specific one where we need to allow them somewhere in the community. And right now, the work that we do right now kind of sets that framework of where they can and can't go. So it's something that we'll need to be thoughtful about as we continue down this path. And like I mentioned before, how can we welcome and encourage new users? My first day on the job, Lakeview Industries came in and they said, we want a spot in Carver. And we were able to find an area that was guided for industrial users that said, here's your perfect fit. We don't have to go through any additional approvals. Welcome to our community. Where, well, we had to go through an EAW, but zoning-wise, we didn't have to go through anything else. But we were able to say, hey, we've thought of you, and we want to have you in our community. So how can we enable that same feeling for new users that we don't have today that we would like to have in the community? So that's through zoning and creating districts that allow for the businesses and the users we would like to see. The next goal is to cut jargon and do general cleanup. So if you ever come into City Hall and you see me like staring at a wall blankly and it looks like I'm having a really tough time, it's probably because I'm reading a certain definition in our zoning code that has haunted me for 2.5 years, and that is the site triangle. I'm smiling at Brenda because she has tried to talk me through this before. So the definition of a site triangle shall mean that triangular area defined as follows: beginning at the point of intersection of the right-of-way of 2 intersecting streets, thence 20 feet along one right-of-way line, thence diagonally to a point on the other right-of-way line, 20 feet from the point of the beginning, thence to the point of the beginning. Great. That definition probably makes sense to someone somewhere, but every time I read it, I get really turned around. And it's really hard when a resident is calling me and they're saying, can I put my fence up to my lot corner if I'm on a corner? And then I read them this definition and it gets really muddled and I struggle. And I often need to say like, hey, I'm gonna call you back. I'm gonna think through your project specifically and I'll give you a call. Something that I think is going to be important with the zoning code update with all of you is cutting that jargon and making it accessible for the average resident of Carver. So If you're thinking about doing a project, I want Joe Schmo to be able to go to our city code, read the regulations, and be able to get a pretty good guess of if it's permitted or not. So another option for the site triangle definition could be, on a corner lot, improvements such as landscaping and fences cannot interfere with the sight lines of traffic. A 20-foot clear zone is required from both property lines and the lot corner, forming a site triangle that must be free of any obstruction. So I obviously wrote that, so I understand it clearly, but I think it cuts some of that jargon and gets rid of some of like the perception that government is hard and tough and you need to navigate it carefully. So one of my goals as a professional is always to make everything that we do more touchable for the average person. It makes it easier for me because it's less phone calls, but it's also easier for the resident on a Saturday night to sit down and try to think about a home project if they can see these rules and just think about them a little bit and think about how it applies to their project. Something else that we need to do is just general cleanup. So something that I've personally found is that our accessory structures right now, so like a shed, doesn't have a side yard setback in our city code. We have determined what it should be, we figured it out, we've gone with the flow. And this is not to point fingers at anyone because this document is huge. Our brains will turn to mush. We're going to get so turned around together that we'll be going just in circles trying to figure out what's happening. And something else to think about is that we're going to find errors the day after adoption. We think about these huge projects and we put so much time and energy into them and we think they make total sense. It gets adopted and then day 2 you look at it and you say, we missed that. So understand that this is not to go back and say that anyone who worked on this previously was crazy and they didn't make sense, because it's huge. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to find them as we continue to use this together. So my last goal for the project is to respond to the market in Carver. So I'm going to get a little bit technical here and talk about straight zoning and the use of a PRD, or a planned residential development. So straight zoning is if a project came in and they were able to go to our zoning ordinance and find the perfect district that matched exactly what they want to do. So again, Chapter 50, the zoning ordinance, is one of our tools. The use of a PRD, or a planned residential development, again, is a tool. We also have Design Carver, the city's comp plan. We have adopted studies and plans. We have experience. We have other communities. We generally aren't the first community to be doing just like typical day-to-day planning, so we communicate a lot. We collaborate with a lot of communities in Carver County. And then we also know the experts. So if we don't know the answer to something, we can generally find the people who do. So all of these together form our planning toolbox. And 2 important things to think about through this process, again, are straight zoning and the use of a PRD. So straight zoning, again, someone comes in, they find the zoning code that matches their project, and it checks all the boxes. We don't have to do any additional approval of any type, so it's not rewriting a district for a specific project. It's just saying, our zoning code matches, great, welcome to the community. So that's usually the default. It's really straightforward, and it's great for typical development. So projects that have come in historically largely require a PRD for, usually it's like the bending of one of the rules. So if a national builder comes in and they say, I can put in this great product, but I cannot meet your 10-foot side yard setback, I need a PRD. We can absolutely have that conversation, but I want to move to a space where we can say, you can have that PRD, but what are you going to do that's creative or different? Not so much just you need to bend one of these rules to be able to make a project work. Do we get something additional? So is there extra conservation that can happen? Would allowing for the smaller side yard setback get us a new product in town that we don't have? Would bending one of the rules give us a great trail system that we hadn't thought of? So I want to use the PRD, or the planned residential development, as a tool, not a default, just because then we can come together with the developer to be able to say, yes, you need X, Y, and Z, but on the flip side, for us to approve that, we also need to see a direct benefit. The PRD is also really tricky for people who check the zoning map to be able to say, my neighborhood is zoned R2 PRD. Great, I cannot go to the city code and find what my specific regulations are. You would need to go back to the specific developer's agreement for your project to be able to find the rules and find that one that might have bent the rules. The tricky thing is that we don't have developer agreements on our website, so instantly if someone sees PRD, they have to call city staff, And again, it's hard to be the person on the other side of the phone, to have someone ask a really straightforward question and to say, I need to pull out a file, I need to dig through that. So the use of the PRD is fantastic for a unique project, but I don't want it to be the typical way that we move forward. If a project can meet our standards, and if there does need to be wiggle room, I hope that we can get to the point where we are big enough advocates for our community that we can say, we'll give you that, but we also need to see something in return as to why we're doing that specifically for you. So those are my major goals for the process. I hope that wasn't terribly boring. The process is that it's going to be a lot of meetings together. It's going to be a lot of reading technical city code documents, so strap in. It's going to be really fun. Every time I send out a packet, I will provide the current version, so what we have right now, as well as the proposed update, so you'll be able to compare them side by side. And then something else that we'll just move through the process. When it's all said and done, we'll have a public hearing, and we'll forward it on to the city council for approval. So that was a lot of information. I want you to ask questions or discussion. Otherwise, I totally get it if this was just a good place to start, and you might have questions as we start the process. I suspect you've seen some zoning code updates, but it's kind of the particular ones we're having a huge issue with, where this is going to be kind of a rewrite of the rules that we use every day. So I'll open it up for questions, discussion, major concerns, general excitement, any of the above.
I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
When we're talking about density, do we count in areas that cannot be built on?
No.
So I have an acre lot
Mm-hmm.
in the Bluffs, but half of it could not be built on because of the
So
bluff
areas
work.
that are taken out of the density calculation are things like right-of-ways, wetlands, ponds, conservation areas. So if there's a conservation easement over that area, which I know there is in the Bluffs, you would take it out. So that does not count for density.
Okay. Even though it's part of my lot.
Correct.
What is the difference between commercial and industrial?
Yeah, so
Now they're going to be joined together, potentially in some areas.
what was that?
I said now that they're joining together, like a commercial / industrial.
Yeah. So the thing that I think about often is that commercial generally has people going in and out of it every day, so requires a pretty big parking lot for patrons, or an industrial user doesn't necessarily do that, so it can have more just employees. I think something that is interesting as we move forward in the future is that industrial in general is really changing. It's not so much the coal burning factory anymore that we see. It's largely technology-based businesses that are manufacturing. So you think about Lakeview, they're using like the die cut, and they're using machines to do plastic cutting, where it's not so much that they're producing something that would have large impact. But something that we'll think about in that commercial and industrial district is, what are those users that feel scary? What industrial user feels scary to have next to commercial? And how can we create a conditional use permit for that potentially? So if one of them feels like a heavy industrial user, we can either move forward with prohibiting them in that area, or a conditional use. We can't prohibit them because we wouldn't be able to put them anywhere else. But we can add that extra step that we can look case by case at an industrial user to make sure it works with our commercial user. Something else that was really interesting when we were developing our comprehensive plan is that Chaska and Victoria had beaten us to the intersection where we all come together. So in areas that we wanted commercial, they might have industrial already there. So we did a little bit of navigating how can we react to their plans and work with them, just so then we don't have a fantastic commercial corridor that we would dream of in any community next to Chaska's heavy industrial user. And we felt that the mix of commercial and industrial kind of solved that issue, that it can be open up to different users, but we can at least be thoughtful about the location of it. That was a really long answer. Are there other questions? Are we looking forward to the process together? I see no excitement on anyone's faces. I promise I will try to keep it as light and fun as we can. And then the biggest goal for me is cutting the jargon. So how can I make this document feel not scary for you, but then not scary for every resident? Just thinking about if it's hard for you to understand where you've been in this more than the average person and thought about zoning more than the average person, I need it to be accessible to you, but then also almost like just the average Joe. So I'm going to ask for a lot of help for that, of how we can take some of these big planning projects and break them down so people understand what our goals are and how we advocate for the community through our zoning code. So it's not sparkly, it's not glittery, but in the end, I think it's going to lead to us being able to use the code as good stewards of the community and create areas of the community that I think people will be really excited about. And then I will direct all credit back to this group because the zoning code will be up to date and will be in really good shape.
So is the zoning code a combination of text and graphics, pictures, because everyone reads and understands things differently?
I know, I wish it was, but it's text. There can be a couple opportunities for diagrams, but it's largely just a text document, which is a bummer. I hope that someday in the future, as a profession, we can move away from some of that just because it's overwhelming. Ben, are you wanting to unmute yourself? I have him muted. He's talking, but he's still muted. Okay. Does anyone have questions, comments? You ready to get going on it? Okay. Jim asked for a cute picture of my baby, so there he is. All right. Thanks for working through that PowerPoint with me. It was a big topic that is tricky, but hopefully we'll work through it together and get it to a really good spot. All right, Greg, I'm handing it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Director Smith. Next item on the agenda is just communications. Are there any communications out there?
Does anyone have questions for me? It's been a while since I've been in the hot seat. Nothing swirling around, Carver, that you need to be able to debunk or have more information about?
Any kind of timeline for the build out for Quick Trip is going pretty quick.
Yes,
Any,
they are still, they're hoping to be open in December. Merry
sounds
Christmas,
great.
Carver. Happy holidays, Carver.
Yes.
Beyond that,
What-
this winter I think is going to be kind of quiet. We don't have any active planning applications right now. So the projects that we've been thinking about, like Summergate and Timber Creek, we haven't seen a preliminary plat application from them. The CDA, we haven't seen anything about their second building. So this, it feels like a really good time to do the zoning code update if we can just focus on that for a while. But I'll keep you updated if we see any applications, but right now, there's nothing in our docket as of today.
Okay. Any other communications? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Commissioner Godell, so moved.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Motion by Commissioner Goodell to adjourn, seconded by Commissioner Weigard. Community Development Director Smith, could you please do a roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner Wigand,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodell.
Aye.
Stephanie, I'm going to try to not butcher your last name. I think it's Griesinger.
That's correct.
Commissioner Griesinger?
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
And Chair Riggs.
Chair Riggs, aye. Thank you, everyone. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
You too.